Iceland sits just south of the Arctic Circle, yet, surprisingly, it doesn't touch the Arctic Ocean. With its glaciers, volcanoes, and frigid climate, you'd think it has a natural claim to Arctic waters. But if you look at the map, you'll notice that Iceland's northernmost shores never quite reach the Arctic Ocean. Greenland, Norway, and even parts of Russia extend into Arctic waters, yet Iceland just misses the cutoff. So what's keeping Iceland's coastline from touching one of the world's coldest and most mysterious bodies of water? Is it a matter of geography, a quirk of tectonic forces, or something even more unexpected? Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll see why Iceland's northern edge isn't what most people assume. To understand why Iceland doesn't touch the Arctic Ocean, we first need to talk about something crucial: latitude. The Arctic Circle is an invisible boundary that sits at approximately 66 degrees, 33 minutes, and 50.3 seconds north. Anything beyond this line is considered part of the Arctic region, meaning it experiences extreme cold and long winters, and crucially, it falls within the domain of the Arctic Ocean. Now, Iceland is incredibly close to this boundary, but not quite there. Its northernmost point is on the mainland. Rifstangi sits at about 66 degrees, 32 minutes north, just a fraction of a degree below the Arctic Circle. The only part of Iceland that crosses this boundary is Kolbeinsey, a tiny uninhabited islet located about 105 kilometers off Iceland's northern coast. It's so small and unstable that it's actually sinking into the sea due to erosion, meaning that Iceland's only physical claim to the Arctic region may one day disappear entirely. But here's where things get interesting. If Iceland is this close to the Arctic, shouldn't its waters be considered part of the Arctic Ocean? The answer is no, and it all comes down to how the world's oceans are officially divided. The Arctic Ocean begins much further north, beyond the Greenland Sea, which sits between Iceland and Greenland. Oceanographers classify this sea as separate from the Arctic Ocean, meaning that Iceland's territorial waters never quite reach that frozen domain. Another key factor is Iceland's geography. Unlike other Arctic nations, Iceland is an isolated island surrounded on all sides by the Atlantic Ocean and its marginal seas. In contrast, countries like Norway, Canada, and Russia have vast land masses extending much further into the Arctic. This unique position places Iceland in an intermediate zone, not fully Arctic, yet distinct from more temperate regions. This has led to some misconceptions. While Iceland exhibits certain Arctic characteristics such as glaciers, subarctic tundra, and extreme seasonal daylight variations, its classification as an Arctic nation differs depending on the criteria used. Scientifically, only a small portion of Iceland's territory lies within the Arctic Circle, and its climate is milder than that of Greenland or northern Russia. Politically, however, Iceland is recognized as one of the 8 Arctic states and plays an active role in Arctic governance. Thus, while Iceland shares strong ties with the Arctic, its status is unique and differs from countries with extensive Arctic land masses like Greenland and Russia. You see, Iceland sits in a unique position, surrounded by 3 major bodies of water: the North Atlantic Ocean, the Norwegian Sea, and the Greenland Sea. These waters create a natural buffer between Iceland and the Arctic Ocean, reinforcing the fact that Iceland does not have direct contact with the Arctic waters. The North Atlantic Ocean dominates Iceland's southern and western coasts, bringing relatively milder conditions. This is the same vast ocean that stretches from the Americas to Europe and Africa. The Norwegian Sea lies to the northeast, separating Iceland from Norway and the Scandinavian peninsula. The Greenland Sea, which sits northwest of Iceland, is the country's closest thing to an Arctic waterway. It connects to the Arctic Ocean through the Fram Strait, a narrow passage between Greenland and Svalbard. However, according to oceanographic definitions, the Greenland Sea itself is not part of the Arctic Ocean. This distinction is crucial. Even though the Greenland Sea shares many characteristics with Arctic waters, such as icebergs, freezing temperatures, and seasonal ice cover, it is still classified as a separate entity. The reason for this lies in the complex system of currents that flow through this region. These currents create a clear boundary between the Arctic Ocean and the waters surrounding Iceland. One of the most important of these currents is the East Greenland Current. This powerful cold water current surges southward, carrying frigid Arctic waters along Greenland's coast. But instead of flowing towards Iceland, these icy waters veer south, blending into the warmer Atlantic. This means that the Arctic Ocean's influence weakens before it ever reaches Iceland's coastline. Another key factor is the Norwegian current. This relatively warm ocean current flows northward along Norway's coast, extending into the waters near Iceland. It helps moderate the climate, keeping temperatures higher than they would be otherwise. This warm current is one of the main reasons why Iceland's seas do not necessarily freeze over in winter like true Arctic waters. Together, these oceanic forces create a natural boundary that separates Iceland from the Arctic Ocean. Even though the Greenland Sea might seem like an extension of the Arctic, the presence of these distinct currents means that Iceland remains within a different oceanic system. In a way, these waters form an invisible wall, preventing Iceland from ever officially touching the Arctic Ocean. The result? Iceland exists in a unique middle ground. It has all the signs of an Arctic nation, but it is surrounded by seas that keep it just outside the Arctic's official borders. This distinction has significant implications, affecting everything from Iceland's climate to its role in global ocean circulation, but perhaps the most fascinating part of this story is how these waters interact with Iceland's weather and environment, keeping the country far warmer than its latitude suggests. One of the most surprising facts about Iceland is that despite being so far north, it has a much milder climate than other regions at the same latitude. For example, Reykjavik, Iceland's capital, has an average winter temperature of around 0 degrees Celsius, while parts of Canada at a similar latitude can reach -30 degrees Celsius or lower. This is due to the powerful ocean currents that surround Iceland and regulate its climate. The most important of these currents is the North Atlantic Current, a warm oceanic flow that originates from the Gulf Stream. This current carries warm waters from the tropical Atlantic northward, where they mix with cooler waters near Iceland. The result is a surprisingly temperate climate for a country that sits just below the Arctic Circle. Without this warm current, Iceland would likely be much colder, with harsher winters and frozen coastlines. At the same time, Iceland is also affected by the cold East Greenland Current, which carries icy Arctic waters southward. However, instead of dominating Iceland's waters, this current flows along Greenland's eastern coast and bypasses Iceland entirely. This means that while Greenland experiences extreme cold and heavy ice coverage, Iceland remains relatively ice-free. This delicate balance between warm and cold ocean currents has a huge impact on Iceland's weather patterns. The warm currents prevent the country from freezing over, while the occasional influence of Arctic air brings snowfall and stormy conditions. These oceanic forces also influence Iceland's marine life, creating rich environment for fish and other sea creatures. In fact, the combination of warm and cold waters makes Iceland one of the world's most productive fishing grounds. While geography and ocean currents explain why Iceland doesn't touch the Arctic Ocean, international classifications and politics also play a crucial role in defining its status. The International Hydrographic Organization, IHO, sets precise boundaries for the world's oceans, and according to its official maps, the Arctic Ocean begins well north of Iceland's territorial waters. Politically, however, Iceland is deeply involved in Arctic affairs. It is a member of the Arctic Council, an international organization that includes nations with territorial claims and interests in the Arctic. Although Iceland does not have direct access to Arctic waters, its strategic location makes it a key player in discussions about Arctic trade routes, environmental policies, and climate change research. Beyond political definitions, Iceland itself is a land in motion. The island sits on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a massive geological fault line where the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates slowly drift apart. This movement causes Iceland to expand by approximately 2 centimeters every year, gradually reshaping its landscape. Over millions of years, this process has created Iceland's volcanoes, geysers, and rugged terrain. However, despite this continuous movement, Iceland is not shifting northward towards the Arctic Ocean. The tectonic forces at play are pulling Iceland in an east-west direction rather than pushing it further into Arctic waters. This means that Iceland's relative position to the Arctic Ocean has remained stable for thousands of years and will likely continue to do so for the foreseeable future. That being said, Iceland's changing geology does affect its maritime boundaries in other ways. Underwater volcanic activity occasionally creates new islands, such as Surtsey, which emerged from the sea in 1963. While these geological processes expand Iceland's landmass, they do not extend its reach into Arctic waters. Unless a major shift in Earth's tectonic activity occurs, Iceland will remain just outside the Arctic Ocean's official borders. So while Iceland may never officially touch the Arctic Ocean, its role in the Arctic is anything but distant. One of the most significant shifts in the Arctic is the rapid opening of new shipping routes. As ice continues to retreat, previously impassable trade corridors are becoming viable, redrawing the map of global commerce. Iceland, strategically located between North America and Europe, is positioning itself as a key maritime hub, offering shorter, more efficient trade routes for goods moving between continents. This shift could bring major economic opportunities, from increased shipping traffic to expanded port infrastructure. But Iceland's involvement in the Arctic goes beyond trade. The country was also at the forefront of polar research, studying everything from shifting ocean currents and rising sea levels to the long-term ecological impact of melting ice caps. Despite not having a direct Arctic coastline, Iceland's strategic location, scientific contributions, and political engagement make it a central player in shaping the future of the Arctic. So does Iceland's influence in the Arctic make it an Arctic nation, even if it doesn't physically touch the Arctic Ocean? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoy learning about fascinating geographic oddities, be sure to like and subscribe for more.